Hello, hello. Welcome to week one of the Confident Nurse Challenge. So, this is going to be a 4-week program where we are talking about how to basically create more self-assurance, self-confidence in your skills as a healthcare professional so that no matter what the hospital throws at you, you will be able to handle it all, get through your day with some energy and capacity to go home and live your life afterwards. And I think this is something that's really important. So each week I'm going to be teaching one step of the process. And so I want to kind of jump into that pretty quickly here. So there's 4 steps. Each one will be building onto it. The reason that I am not teaching them all at once is our brains really need repetition. Generally, to change the way that your brain functions, you need to hear something and do something, actually practice and implement like 60 times. So after you take in this information, I want you to start practicing and just notice the awareness that you're going to have after this. Go to your shifts and see if you can practice and implement and see how that feels for you. Because I want to use the analogy of basically knowing there's a problem doesn't necessarily fix the problem. And I think this is something that a lot of us in healthcare can get so caught up in being like, well, I know there's a problem and I also know, how to take care of myself. I know how to eat right. I know I need to exercise. I know how to, I know I need to do XYZ to care for myself. But if I'm sitting in my living room staring out the window and looking at the weeds in my lawn, me knowing the weeds are in my lawn doesn't remove the weeds from my lawn. It just makes me aware of them. Now my brain is focused on them and can be hyper aware and fixated on them. So this is the thing, right? We got to be aware of those weeds, but you actually, to remove those weeds, those quote unquote problems, you have to actually go outside and dig them up from the root all the way out in order to truly remove the weeds from your lawn so that you can look out your window and notice, oh wow, I have a beautiful lush green lawn without any weeds in it. This is the same thing with, anything that we see as a problem. If you constantly are getting into being frustrated, overwhelmed, you're constantly short-staffed, you're constantly picking up overtime shifts because you feel like you have to. You'd love to say no, but you just feel guilted into it, or maybe you have those extra expenses, but you don't feel like you're doing it for the right reason. You feel like you have to, you're guilted into it. There's just so much pent up frustration, resentment towards your job. Those are the weeds, that constant feeling of anxiety, of overwhelm, getting in that fight flight. I don't know if I can handle this situation. I don't know if I can keep putting myself in this situation that is going on. That your alarm clock goes off and you get that pit in your stomach of just absolute dread. The drive to work where you're thinking about all the worst case scenarios. Those are all the weeds in your garden. Knowing about them literally just makes your brain fixate on them and so strongly hyper aware that it just increases the discomfort. So this 4-week program is really going to be that 101 version of how to actually remove those weeds from your garden and start feeling more self-assured, more confident, more like, I got this. No matter what comes my way, I'm going to be able to handle it. I'm going to be able to work through it. That is what I want for y'all. And that is obviously the intention of this program. None of these things are things that generally inherently happen to people. Some people over time can kind of develop strategies that work for them, but these are not things that we inherently have. These are learned skills, and I have learned them the hard way, and I've also learned them by coaching a lot of my one-on-one clients and helping them figure this out. And I kind of have taken all of that and developed this process. So I'm really honored to be able to share it with you guys. So, the other thing is really important to notice is there's so many times that we can get caught in this. Like, if I was in a different job, if I just left nursing, if, we had enough staff, if we had a better manager, like, all it would be better. And yes, those things can make the environment that you work in better, but that doesn't necessarily change your experience. It's really difficult to, I mean, honestly, it's like impossible to fix a inside problem. And honestly, like our experience of our world is an inside problem with an outside source. We really have to do the inside work first, understand ourselves deeply, what our needs are, how to support ourselves in order to enjoy our nursing environment, enjoy where we work to such a higher degree. And then you go and you change that like outside source because you want that, because that's something like moving you towards goals and things that you already have yourself set up for, not just trying to take you away from one shitty situation and probably put you in another shitty situation. Um, so at the end of the day, here's what we kind of have to understand. Our brains are designed to protect us. Our brains really have these kind of instincts, our subconscious, our primitive brain, your reptilian brain, whatever you want to call it, that like lower level brain functioning is designed to keep us safe, right? Your brain is going to be doing things that it thinks are important for keeping us safe. But our brains have not evolved to current society, current healthcare experience. Our brains still think that like if we put ourselves in danger, there's going to be like a lion, tiger, or bears, oh my, coming after us. Or if we are kicked out of our tribe, we're risking starvation, or again, that lion, tiger, or bear coming after us. So we have to have some level of understanding of like how our brain handles these situations. So if you're going to work and you're constantly short-staffed, you're constantly getting really difficult patient assignments, you're getting admissions that are wild, you're, getting all of these admissions, discharges, things like the rotating doors constantly being thrown at you, everything, the orders are coming, the pharmacy doesn't have your meds, like everything is broken. All of these people are mad at you for things that are outside of your control. All of those things, your brain is interpreting and determining, like, is this a threat to my well-being? And so most of those things your brain starts interpreting as a threat to your well-being because you get into that fight flight mode of just like anxious and overwhelmed and like there's so much going on. How am I going to be able to handle this? Like your brain is going a million miles an hour. And when that happens, your brain is like, oh my God, I am unsafe. Like, I need to fight. I need to run. I need to do something. Like, get me out of this situation. So at the end of the day, your brain is avoided or designed to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And so when the healthcare environment becomes painful for our brains, your brain is then suggesting over and over again, hey, you got to get out of this situation. You got to leave here. This is not good for you. You got to go do something else, and that's why we have that pre-shift dread. That's that like pit in the stomach when you wake up in the morning. That is why this is happening. And I think this is so important for us to understand because it makes so much more sense. And so the other thing is our brains are creatures of habit. Like when one thing that could be bad or traumatic happens to us, our brains create, I don't know if you've seen like the Inside and Out movie, but like those core memories. And those core memories can be good things, but they can also be kind of like bad things. But that core memory, like imagine it being like a little ball that like drops in a pond and there's a ripple and a ripple and a ripple and a ripple. And like those patterns, your brain fixates on it. And when it fixates on something, it tends to repeat the pattern. So you're going to experience the same emotional response. You have a shitty day at work. And then you come back to work the next week and you're like, it's going to be terrible. I'm going to have all these things. I'm going to get, a patient who it goes south on me and is critical. And like, what if they code? Like, what's going to happen? What am I going to do? Like, your brain keeps almost not necessarily always in real life, but your brain keeps reliving those scenarios over and over again. And the problem is when we don't process the information, we don't work through that like initial ball that dropped in the pond, it keeps repeating itself. We keep living in this same situation, which is why we get into such incredible deep levels of burnout, of deep exhaustion, deep overwhelm, the anxiety, the fight, flight, the stress hormones are constantly being released. And whether or not it's actually happening in our environment or our brain is freaking out that it could happen and it's replaying that event, we relive it over and over again and it just completely zaps and drains our energy. So the whole purpose of this four-step process and the Confident Nurse Challenge is to kind of like have that ball drop in the pond when something happens, and then you be able to like pick that ball back up, look at it, evaluate, okay, what happened here? Oh, I'm having an emotional response. Okay, that's fine. Like, that makes complete sense. Like, what do I want to take away from this? How do I take care of myself to get through this situation? How do I move forward from this? And, like, did I learn something? Did I, what do I want to take away from this? How do I want to handle these situations differently? And moving forward from it so that you don't keep getting that same traumatic response happening over and over again. Or if something remotely, like this is what we used to happen, if something like I'd had like one really bad patient experience and then it would haunt me and I would think about it all the time. And then if another bad patient experience were to happen, I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be like that other time. Like, and I would just hyperfixate it and I would try to control the situation. But as we all know in healthcare, like, yes, there is things that we can control, but there's a hell of a lot that we can't control. We can't control what other people are going to do. We can't control what our patients' bodies are going to do at the end of the day. There's so much things that are out of our control, and that would just leave me feeling so powerless and so trapped. So this process is really stopping that pattern from repeating itself so that you can continue to grow your own strengths, your own skills, build the confidence in your nursing practice, your healthcare practice to really kind of step into your own confidence, your own pattern, and be able to work past those things. And through this process, it has really allowed myself and my like one-on-one clients to create nursing practices where I love to say like it's not like 100% of the time because shit's gonna happen. Like you're always gonna get that one day that's like a complete dumpster fire. So it's like that like 90% of the time I feel so cool, calm, collected. I got this, even if the unit is on fire, even if like my patient is incredibly critically sick and I'm doing the most, I still feel like I'm in control. I know exactly what I'm going to do next. I know how to move through those situations and be able to get through my day and come home and be like, yeah, I'm going to be exhausted because I just had a chaotic day, but I'm not like that bone deep exhaustion where I'm a complete zombie, I'm numbed out and I can't function anymore. And that is kind of what I want for you. Whereas like majority of the time, I feel good at the end of the day. Like I'm at the point now where I'm working like a 12-hour shift and then I'm coming home and like coaching a client and I feel like I'm in a good headspace and able to show up for somebody else and like as well as myself and take care of myself. So that's really where I've gotten to, and I know this has worked for a lot of my clients where they are starting to really build lives that they love outside of the work because they have that energy and capacity. But at work, they're able to really feel like, you know what, no matter what, I can figure this out. And that's what I want for all of you. So, how does this start? Starts, I guess, with that things we've already talked about is that understanding of your brain. A question I really like to start asking my brain when these situations, like you start noticing these patterns. You notice that pattern come up where you're just like, oh, okay, every time I get an admission or every time this one charge nurse makes the assignment, I'm already like immediately frustrated or immediately like annoyed and resentful and like mad at this whole situation, or I get this particular kind of patient and I'm just like I can't even, like, numbed out, annoyed, all these things. If that's the pattern you're noticing, I want you to just take some time and notice, like, okay, where's my brain going? And this is something that we're generally unconscious to until you start asking yourself these questions. Okay, where's my brain going? And what is it trying to do? What is it trying to communicate with me? A lot of the times, like, our brains are going in thought loops. Like, a lot of the times, we're not thinking new and unique thoughts. We're thinking thoughts that we've thought dozens of times before. And every time we think a thought in our brain, it sends a signal to our body, and our body has a nervous system response, which then gets translated back into our brain, and our brain labels that nervous system response as an emotion. Our emotions, the way that our body is experiencing sensation based on the ways that we're thinking, are the indicators for like what is going on in our brains. So I feel like a lot of healthcare professionals, including the way I used to be, I really numbed that part out where I was so disconnected that I wasn't even sure what I was like emotionally experiencing beyond that like frustration, annoyance, just numbness. But here's the thing, we need to experience the messenger, which is the emotion, because that's going to tell us where did our brain go? What does it need? And how do I move myself through this? At the end of the day, here's the thing that's crazy. Emotions are meant to last about 30 seconds. That's it. But if we push them away, we resist persists. So if we push them away, we numb them out, we force them away, we drink that bottle of wine, we eat the chocolate cake. If we do any of those things, those emotions aren't recognized, and they basically turn into that toddler who's like pulling on their mom's shirt, being like, Mom, 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 Mom. They're like constantly being like, hey, something's important here, you need to address this. Hey, something's important here, you need to address this. Hey, something's important here, you need to address this. And so we need to kind of validate that, like, no matter what we're going through, there is a reason that we are reacting the way that we are. No matter like what is happening in our environment, no matter what your staffing ratios are, no matter what your patient acuity is, your body, your brain is having a response to your environment. No matter what it is, it's there for a reason to communicate something with you. And here's the thing. A lot of the time we get in this cycle of like, I should be able to handle this. I should be able to deal with all this pressure. I should be able to deal with this stress. Like, I can't believe I haven't figured this out already. Like, that way of thinking adds to the stress. It adds to us feeling crappy. It adds to the frustration, the resentment, all of these things that we can be feeling about our job. It just amplifies those. We really cannot, and I can tell you this from personal experience because I've been there and tried it. We can't beat ourselves out of feeling crappy or disliking our jobs, or like, we really cannot. The way out of the discomfort is by, number one, feeling those emotions and validating your experience, saying like, okay, my body, my brain is having this response for a reason. What's that reason? These things don't happen, you know, they're happening on purpose. And so we generally aren't feeling things, aren't thinking things for the first time. I know I already said that, but I think I want to go back to that because a lot of the times these patterns have repeated ourselves throughout our, childhood, our lives, all the way till now, if we had that, we had a traumatic work experience, that's going to change the way that you're thinking about your nursing practice, thinking about the way that you're showing up, and that's going to impact how you do things in the future. And if you don't look at it in a constructive way, it can negatively affect you moving forward because your brain is constantly trying to protect you, right? Avoid pain, seek pleasure. Your brain is constantly trying to protect you and say, like, okay, that situation was really bad. I felt unsafe. How do I prevent myself from getting in those situations? What do I do in this situation? And a lot of the times it's just going into that fight flight response in your brain's like, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of here? How do I remove myself from this situation? Which is not generally the case in how we can do things in healthcare. Like, if your patient is crashing, you can't just be like, all right, this is uncomfortable for me and my brain. I'm just gonna leave now. No, we have to be present in that situation and care for somebody else. So this is the work that we got to do outside of those moments, outside of the four walls of the hospital, so that we can handle the chaos that's happening inside those four walls of the hospital when it comes up for us. So when these kinds of things, you notice these patterns, start asking yourself, how has this served or protected me in the past? And a lot of the times you can kind of get a memory or like, hey, why am I reacting this way? And be like, oh, it makes complete sense because, I had that bad patient experience in the past and my brain is trying to protect me from that or trying to like be more prepared this time. But here's the thing, things generally happen the same way that they did before. So being prepared to relive a situation or a confrontation with a family member or something like that is not necessarily the most useful brain power because things never generally, most of the time, don't happen the same way twice, right? Like it's gonna come and happen in a slightly different way. So, what is a better way to use your energy? Being prepared and like being focused, mentally prepared to handle whatever comes up, or to have quote unquote mastered that one situation in your brain. Generally, we want to pick that like being mentally focused, prepared to handle whatever comes up, right? That's just like something that you can be aware of. So, how has this served or protected you in the past? Like, how does it make complete sense that your brain is coming up with this response to that situation? This is really where we take a little bit of time to validate our experience, our nervous system experience, our thinking experience, like what is happening for you. It's not a problem that you're having an emotional response. You're human. It's going to happen. You're going to have some sort of thinking. You're going to have some sort of nervous system sensation, emotional response to the good, the bad, and the ugly that is happening. It's just why asking yourself, like, okay, what is this? Why is this here? What is this here to tell me? And really like validating, like, okay, no wonder why I feel frustrated right now. Like, I just got an extra admission and, like on top of my other patients, and I have a lot going on. Like, it makes sense that my brain is frustrated right now. This is really the first step. And coming at it, this is the hardest part. Coming at it with a sense of self-compassion, of like, yeah, like I get it. Like I get that I would be upset in this situation. I get that I would be stressed out in this situation. How do I support myself through this? Like really, this is the first step of the process, is understanding yourself, your response to situations, and validating your experience. Because as I said, you cannot beat yourself out of thinking a certain way and change your thinking for the better. We have to do this from a self-compassionate, self-loving area to be able to create constructive growth for handling situations better in the future and feeling better in your practice.